In this historic southern Utah town, early settlers didn't have access to enough water because the best source of it was on the other side of a large mountain. We'll see what amazing ingenuity they employed to solve the problem next on Ghost Towns and More. In southeastern Utah lies the small town of Blanding, settled by pioneer families struggling to find a way to establish a viable community. Located in an isolated and windy area called White Mesa near the base of Blue Mountain, early settler Walter C. Lyman and his brother Joseph first visited the area in 1897.
He basically had this vision of this city on White Mesa. And he thought this can be a cultural center, an education center, but there was no water.
Walter Lyman searched for a water source that could supply the needs of the new settlement. Residents diverted water from the southern Johnson Creek drainage on the south slopes of Blue Mountain to supply irrigation and water for their needs.
They went up and they built a canal from this Johnson Creek and built that down to the community. Johnson Creek was good, but it was a runoff creek, right? So they built these wooden pipes down into town so they could get the water down into town. And of course it was all unfiltered, you know, so people talk about, you know, pulling toads and tadpoles and salamanders out of their, you know, out of their faucets and out of the water and stuff like that.
Because water supplies dried up before the end of the year, residents knew they had to find a better source. Resident David Patton Black was riding his horse up on Blue Mountain and discovered a stream that had an abundance of fresh water called Indian Creek.
He found a stream of water that far surpassed what was coming this direction. There was water going to waste that needed to be brought here.
But there was one major problem. This rich source of water was located on the opposite side of the mountain from where the town was located. David Black, his brother Ben, and Walter Lyman considered the idea of building a ditch to divert the water around the mountain, but it wasn't practical because of the problems of keeping it open throughout the year. There seemed to be no way of getting the water to the town. Then, as the men surveyed the situation, someone came up with a novel idea.
We think we can dig a tunnel from this side to the other side and bring that water over to make it available to us.
The idea of building a tunnel through the mountain was a monumental idea, but how to get the financing and labor to do it was another thing entirely. The tunnel would have to be over a mile long.
They needed financing. They figured it would cost them about $50,000, so they created a water company and sold shares in the company. They got a bunch of people to come up and dig, you know, fall and winter, because there's nothing else for them to do during these times anyway, so we can hire them. And so my great-grandfather, Walter C., went up and started digging this tunnel.
The project was started in 1919, but not everyone in town thought the project was feasible. However, using hand tools and wheelbarrows, a group of men got started. After 3 years, one problem after another hindered the progress until it was abandoned in 1922. Walter C. Lyman was the only person who continued to work on the tunnel despite continual opposition. He did all he could to keep the project alive, even starting a gold mine to earn revenue to keep the project going, despite suspicions about his intentions.
They didn't get much gold, but he would dig this gold mine trying to get money to finance the tunnel. And then a lot of people started accusing him of just, you know, mining for himself and all this kind of stuff. So the work on the tunnel kind of came to an end.
As the years passed, the Great Depression and World War II hindered efforts even further. The town was growing, and not having enough water became increasingly problematic.
Before they decided if we don't have water on that Indian Creek coming this direction, we're in trouble here, not just on a once in a while basis, but every year, every year, every year.
Out of desperation, residents felt they needed to act. Finally, in 1939, the decision was made to re-enter the tunnel to resume work. Unfortunately, much of it had caved in.
So all of this work that they had done, and like I said, they did 1,000 feet, maybe even 2,000 feet, the tunnel collapsed and it was gone. But they still needed water. And so my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, and then his son, Marvin Finlinson Lyman, they decided we're going to do this, right? We're going to build this tunnel. And so they got a guy by the name of Vet Bradford. And Vet was a mining engineer. He knew what he was doing, was running some mines in the area. And so they brought him up and they said, okay, you know, how do we do this? How can we engineer this?
Work was slow and difficult, but now many residents of Blanding were determined to see it through. Mining railroad tracks were installed to help with removal of the waste rock. An irrigation company was also formed. With workers digging from both sides of the mountain, the work progressed. Walter C. Lyman's son Marvin owned a car repair shop in Blanding and used much of the profits from his shop to help finance the project. He wanted the project to succeed even if it took all he had. Many other determined residents sacrificed by donating money, labor, and time. Some even went into debt. The irrigation company also secured loans. But despite all these efforts, there were some who felt it was a waste of time and resources.
And so there was controversy within the irrigation company ownership as to whether they should be doing that or not. And is it foolish to go in debt for something that we don't know that we can accomplish?
With crews working from both sides of the mountain toward each other, interest and the story of the tunnel gained widespread attention. Everyone wondered if the crews could dig accurately enough to meet with sufficient precision that the water could travel through. Then, on December 27, 1951, the crews broke through and met.
They said the floor met at perfect level, but the sides were off. They were off about a foot on the sides. So they had the level exactly on, but and then the water came rushing through, and that's been one of their primary sources of water ever since.
But when they busted through, well, I guess who was the happiest people in Blanding? The members of the irrigation company who had borrowed the money to make it possible to have that occur.
The people of Blanding were elated to finally have pure mountain water for their homes with what seemed like a total miracle. All the criticism and doubts were gone. Some described seeing the water emerge from the tunnel as miraculous as Moses striking water from a rock in the desert. The tunnel was complete, and this heroic feat of engineering was over 5,400 feet long. With all the starts and stops on the project, it was finally complete after 30 years. Now Blanding could grow with enough clean water for everyone.
It made it so that the community could grow and survive.
Although Walter C. Lyman did not live to see the completion of the tunnel, his legacy and the story of the Blanding Tunnel is a remarkable example of what vision and determination can do if people are willing to commit themselves to facing a problem and solving it, especially in a united effort for the benefit of others.
The Blanding Tunnel is really the story of Blanding, right? I mean, it's water, and water is king in the West. How amazing is that? To just, this is what needs to happen, so let's go do it. they had issues, they had roadblocks, they had people opposing them, but it needed to be done, so they went and did it. And I think that's a pretty remarkable trait.